Hi everyone. In this quick tutorial I'm going to show you how to apply a texture using UV mapping to Blender 2.79, and we'll be using cycles for this. Okay, so start off by opening up Blender, and up here in the top center where it shows the render engine, we're going to change it from Blender Render to Cycles Render. I actually think it's less steps and easier, and the benefit is that it looks a lot nicer inside Cycles. Okay, so Cycles Render is turned on. Let's go ahead and select our cube, X to delete. Let's do Shift A, and we'll add in a mesh plane. Okay, so you really need two windows here to be able to do UV mapping. You need the 3D windows so you can see what you're doing and work, and you need a UV image editor. So I'm going to come right up here. When my mouse pointer changes to a double arrow, I'm going to right mouse click. I'll then left mouse click split area, and I'll just go ahead and left click right there in the middle. I'll then come to the right hand window, and I'll come down here to the bottom left hand corner where I see this little icon of a gray cube with two little triangles, and I'll click on that, and I'll change it from a 3D view to a UV image editor. Okay, and I'll zoom into my UV image editor with my mouse wheel, and you can also pan your UV image editor window by holding down your mouse wheel and moving it up, down, left, and right. Okay, so I will need these tools on the right hand side, but I'm not going to really need this toolbar on the left hand side over here. So with my mouse pointer in my 3D view, I'll press T and that will close it. You can press T again and that'll bring it back up. Okay, I'll zoom in on my plane. Okay, so the first step in UV mapping is to unwrap the object. So you're going to tab into edit mode and choose edit mode. You need to make sure that the whole object is selected, and then you're going to press U, and you're going to get all these different choices here. Probably the two most common choices are the top two, Unwrap and Smart UV Project. So Unwrap is great for automatic unwrapping, but it really works a lot better when you start doing things called marking seams, which I will show in the next video when we unwrap a cube. This is a really simple object because it's a plane. It's already two-dimensional and flat, so it'll unwrap just fine. So when I click on Unwrap, you'll see the two-dimensional representation over here on the right. This is the easiest thing because the 2D representation is the exact same as the 3D representation. Alright, so now that we've got that, I'm going to just left click and widen my toolbar over here. Okay, so now we need a texture. So go to your favorite web browser, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in something like concrete texture, and it's real important that you put in the word texture, and I'll just do an image search, and I want to find one that's got some good quality to it. Okay, so when you're looking for textures, first of all you want to make sure that you find some that aren't copywritten, that are free for download. I will, in class, because this video is primarily for my students, I will provide you a Google Doc that has a whole bunch of free texture websites out there. But for now, you can go ahead and type in what you're looking for, followed by the word texture. So if you look at a lot of these, they are landscape, and they are rectangular. They're not square. So you can put a rectangular texture, like say this one, onto a perfect square, but that means that it's not going to show everything. If you do show everything, then you're going to get a distorted texture. So I think I'm going to go ahead and choose this one here. It's got some pretty nice. Actually, yeah, I'll go with this one here. So this is a little bit more wide, and I'll go ahead and click on it, and I'm going to now right mouse click on it, left mouse click save link as. It's going to my desktop, and I'm going to get rid of some of this name here. It's pretty long. It's pretty detailed. I like that, but I don't need it to be this big. Okay, so you can get rid of pretty much everything. I'm just going to call this dirty concrete. I'll call it Dirty Concrete 1 just in case I download a bunch more. Sorry about my keys all over the screen there. And I'll hit save. Okay, so we'll let that download. Okay. All right, so here is the texture here, and you can see it's a pretty good texture, but notice again that it is rectangular, and we're going to fit a square on here. Okay, so here we go. So here's the way you can bring it in. There's a couple ways to do it. We're going to do the simpler, easier way. So we're going to come over here and click on the material panel, and you can see that in the material panel right here there are no material slots. So we're going to click on new, and we have a new material here that Blender's named with its generic naming, and I'm going to go ahead and call this concrete matte for material and hit return. Okay, so right now we've got surface, and I've got a diffuse surface, which means just a solid color. And of course I can go ahead and choose a color, and if I tab back out of object mode, you'll see I can see it here, but I can't see the color. So why can't I see the color? Well, if I press Z, I will then get some extra visual choices here, and if I choose material, now I'll see this material over here. I'm going to go back to solid just for a moment, just so you guys can see. Okay, so how do I load the image texture on there? Well, it's kind of hidden, and the first time I did this, it took me a little while. So to the right of the little color bar here, there's a little tiny button with a dot, and it's right here where it says color. It's this little dot. And when you click on it, you're going to see a whole bunch of choices here. You want to go to the second column where it says texture, and you're going to choose image texture. So now we can go ahead and open up our image texture. So we're going to choose open. I'm going to go to my desktop because that's where it downloaded to. And if you can't find your texture, if you forget what the name is, or you have a ton of images there and you just can't remember it, come up here to the top of Blender and you'll see 3 buttons. Second button shows you some more information about the files. The third button with the 4 squares, this shows you an actual thumbnail. And so now you can actually see your images. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that. Okay, so now the concrete is loaded into Blender. But I don't see it in my UV image editor, and I sure as heck don't see it over here. I'm not sure why I just said that. The way you see it over here on the object is to simply go back and press the letter Z, like we did before, and you can choose material. And you'll see there is the concrete, so that's pretty cool. You can zoom in and you can see it. If you press Z again and you choose texture, you'll see that it gets a little bit darker, but it's the same thing. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and bring my light over, bring it down a little bit closer. Okay, if you want to see the true effects of this, you can go into what's called rendered view, and that's special to cycles. So if I press Z one more time and I choose rendered, now you can actually see the light, and you can see this corner here is a little bit brighter. But I can't select my light, and I can't select my camera, I can't really move around. So I'm going to go back to either material or texture, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this window here into 2 again. So I'm going to split it in half horizontally. So to get a horizontal split, I'm going to come right over here on this divider line, wait for the double arrows, right mouse click, I'm going to left mouse click split area, and this time I'll go like that. Okay, so this bottom view, that's going to be where I can work and select my light and all that. And this top view, this is going to be the render view. This is what's going to look, nice. So I'll press Z up here and I'll choose rendered. Okay, so now I can see it, and I'll zoom in up. Okay, so now if I take my light and I move it down here, you can clearly see in real time, because of cycles, you can see that light moving around. So that's pretty cool. And of course, if I change the light in any way, the plane will be affected. So, okay, a couple little tweaks here and we'll finish up. Oh, let me get the texture showing up in the UV image editor. So to get it showing up in the UV image editor, you have to come down here to the bottom where you see 3 buttons. You'll see open, you'll see new, and you'll see this image browser here. We'll go over new a little bit later on, but you don't need to open up the concrete texture again because it's already loaded into Blender. You can just come here to the browse images, and this is where you'll see all your images you've loaded up. Right now we just have 1. So when you load it up, Blender, for some strange reason, always zooms in, so you're going to have to scroll out and zoom out. Okay, so there's the texture, but I want to see my actual UVs. So I'm going to come back over here to my 3D window, tab into edit mode, and now I can actually see my UV over the texture here. Now here's kind of a neat thing that I can do here. If I want to change the size of the texture, I can press S and I can scale down the UVs. And you can see up there in the top left-hand corner, it's changing in real time. Now here's what you have to know with UV editing. Over here, when I'm editing the UVs, I am not, I repeat, not changing anything about the object. The mesh is over here. That's the size and the scale, and size and scale are the same thing. But that's the rotation and all that kind of stuff, the location. Over here, I'm just editing the UVs. So I scale down the UVs, but then I can also press G and grab them and move them to another place. So see these stains over here? If I press G and I grab this UVs and I put it right here, you'll see that now up here I'm now focusing on getting that gross dirty stain there. So I can really pick and choose what I want. If I'd rather have this kind of this white wash over here, I can G grab and move it over here, and you can see that now that's what's showing up. So that's why artists use UV mapping. Yeah, it's work, but you get to really customize and do things here. Now here's the cool thing, is that I can right click and I can select any one of these UVs, and I can press G and I can grab it and I can move it anywhere I want. Now this would be a little weird to just move one. I'm going to press Control Z and undo. Oops, undo, there we go. But I can select two of these UVs and press G for grab, and I can go ahead and do something like that and really stretch them out. The problem with that, though, is that you have to remember I've got the UV stretched out like a rectangle, but my object is still a perfect square. So it's not really ideal. So a better representation would be something more along the lines of this, because this is more of a perfect square. Then I can go ahead and I can select all, scale, G for grab. I can even do R for rotate, so I can have it at a 45-degree angle. I can flip it if I just rotate it. You get the idea. You can really kind of customize it and tweak it. So the last thing I'll show you is what happens if I go outside the texture. Well, if I grab it and I put it outside the texture, you're going to see an effect called tiling. And what's going to happen is, even though the texture ends on these four lines here, the texture actually does continue out here in this gray area. And if I move my UVs out here, let's see if you can see it. You can sort of see these lines going on here, and it's tiling. Let me see if I can show you a better example. Yeah, you can sort of see it. Concrete's not the best to check this out with. A brick texture would be a much better one. But basically, the texture is repeating itself indefinitely. You want to generally avoid tiling unless it's a texture that's meant for tiling. So that's pretty much it. You can scale. You can scale your texture. You can, or your UVs. You can rotate your UVs. And of course, you can G, grab your UVs and move them around. And you can customize it. Press Tab, get back into object mode, and there you go. The very last comment I'll put on that I'll add here is that generally you want to avoid any more modeling here. If you decide, oh gosh, I want to model this. So for instance, if I go back into edit mode, now if I scale up this plane, it's not really going to be a big deal. It's still a square. But if I go ahead and I want to get a little bit more fancy, and I decide to extrude this on the x-axis, and then I decide to take these two verts and I decide to extrude these on the y-axis, Blender doesn't know about this new geometry here. So Blender can't, sorry about my keys there, Blender can't UV map it. So you see that it's stretching over here and it's not even showing up over here. It just looks really gross over here. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to unwrap this again. So you'd have to select all, U to unwrap, and you'd have to unwrap it. And now you can see it's showing up over here in the UV image editor. And if we look over here. I'll get back into object mode. Take my lamp, lift it up. Okay, so now you can see I've got a very different object, but so generally you want to finish your modeling for the most part. Now if you discover you have to do something or the job calls for more modeling, then great, go ahead and do it. But you will generally have to do some more unwrapping. But here it is here, and again I can scale it, grab it, rotate it. I can press R and then 90, and I can rotate it a perfect 90 degrees. And there you go. So I can kind of customize it, and now you can see it going on there. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Hope to see you in the next one, and happy UV unwrapping.